A warm welcome to our special guest, one of the masters of this house, Mr. Brian Hayes, Irish member of the European Parliament from the European People's Group. Many thanks for being with us this morning for the question and answer round. And I'm sure you would like to say 2 or 3 words of introduction, and then we come to the questions. Many thanks.
Well, good morning, everyone, and it's a great privilege to speak to you all here from Brussels in the European Parliament. But of course, the actual Parliament that you're sitting in right now is the home of the European Parliament in Strasbourg, so it's great to see you there. I'm an Irish MEP, and I also understand that there's a school from my own constituency in Dublin, and I'd like to welcome them to the European Parliament especially, and it's great to see so many people there. It's a great privilege to represent the people of Ireland in the European Parliament. We are a very small country, and we're one of a family of countries that really appreciates the fact that we are in the European Union. When you're in the European Union, it doesn't mean that you give up your identity, or you give up your language, or you give up your customs. It means that you celebrate all those things that make you different and unique within a family of nations. And when one looks at what happened in the first half of the last century, when close to 50 million people died on the continent of Europe, and you see the 70 continuous years of peace that have been established since the end of the Second World War, we've much to celebrate in Europe. We've much to be grateful for, and we cannot take for granted the hard-won peace and the progress that's been made across our continent. We started small in terms of the number of member states, and now we are a family of member states. And if there's one reflection I would make about young people and their role in the European Union, and it's a negative point because it relates to the recent decision for the United Kingdom to leave our European Union. But what was really fascinating in that campaign and the aftermath were the voice of young people, British young people who wanted to remain in the European Union and were so annoyed and upset with the result. And I think the great hope for Europe is amongst young people, the coming together of young people, the sharing of ideas, of language, of culture, our ability to move around as a younger generation to all parts of the European Union, to learn so much from that and to enhance one's own life as a consequence of that. And it's really through young people that we need to look to make sure that the dream of the European Union survives and continues, despite all the difficulties, of which there are many. But we look to young people especially, and your inspiration to guide us in the European Parliament. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And before starting with the questions, just a reminder, we'll do this like in the real Parliament, so we have limited time. Time is very precious. Please keep your question to 30 seconds, and we'll try to limit the answer to 3 minutes. When you put your question, please stand up, say your name and where you come from, and then put your question. Who would like to be the first to put a question to Mr. Hayes? Number 494, please.
Delegates, hi, my name is Andreas Samoudis and I come from the island of Cyprus. I'd like to ask, would the EU let Turkey join if refugees keep entering Europe in an uncontrollable manner, despite the fact that Turkey is still refusing to equip forces in Cyprus?
Well, that's a really important question, and it's a question that a lot of my colleagues grapple with on a constant basis, because Turkey is a neighbouring country. Turkey is very close on the borders of the European Union currently. It's a very large country with many, many millions of people who live there. And it's also a country that has gone through, up till recently, a dramatic improvement in its economy and a dramatic improvement in its own position. There is, in my personal view, no support within Parliament for Turkey to join the European Union right now. I'm not saying it will never happen, but I don't believe in the foreseeable future it will happen, largely because the questions that still prevail around the issues of human rights, on the questions of democracy. And even though Turkey is a key partner for us, especially on the whole migration issue, as a means of trying to resolve some of the issues before they come to the shores of Europe and before they are resolved, and that must continue. I still do not believe that there is political support in Parliament for a quick accession, an early accession of Turkey to the European Union. I'm not saying it will never happen, but I do not believe at the moment that is likely to happen. We need to see further progress in political reform in Turkey. Some of the remarks that have been made by Mr. Erdogan recently about our member states, Germany and the Netherlands, have been appalling, quite frankly. And that was articulated by our President, President Tajani, only this week in Parliament here in Brussels. So I believe Turkey is a long way to go before there is any possibility of it joining the European Union.
The next question. 421, please.
My name is Fedra. I'm from Cyprus. I'd like to ask whether the European Commission predicts a chain reaction after the most recent Brexit. If so, how do they intend to face the problem and what measures should be taken?
That's a really important question because Brexit's on all our minds right now. Some countries are worse affected. My own country, Germany, Belgium, the Netherlands, countries that have high exports to the United Kingdom. And we've got to make sure, having come through the worst of times in the last decade after the financial crisis, that we don't allow the Brexit issue to become a new opportunity for further financial contagion or risk within the European Union. So we're working with the Council to produce a resolution. At the next plenary meeting in April, where you're sitting right now, we will have a debate on this issue. We will set out our red lines in the negotiation, and those resolutions will then go to the European Council to formalise its position as a guidance. What's really important is to remember that even though the European Union, that Britain are leaving the European Union, we cannot regard Britain as a third country like Brazil or like Mexico or Argentina or Australia, because it's so close to us. It's so important to us. 40% of all European loans come through the City of London in some shape or form. And I think to stop the chain reaction that you refer to, we need to put in place two things. One, we've got to continue with our job in trying to integrate the European Union to make sure it works better, the single market to make sure it provides the jobs, growth and investment for our people. But equally, we've got to ensure that we're outward looking, that we do new trade deals, that we did recently with Canada on the CETA deal. And I hope in the future to do a deal with the United States of America and with other parts of the world. So here's the point. Europe is about 7% of the world's population. We represent about 20% of the world's economic growth in terms of wealth, and 50% of all social spending in the world happens in the European Union. Now, you know those numbers don't ultimately add up. So we've got to become more outward looking, and we've also got to complete the job of the European Union in terms of the internal market. If we do those two things, we can stop a chain reaction coming from Brexit. And we also need a good deal from these negotiations to make sure that the British financial system and Europe's financial system can still remain on good terms and integrated so that any negative impact from Brexit is mitigated.
Number 178 is next.
Hello, my name is Lazaros and I'm from Cyprus as well. My question is simple. Do you believe that the European Union will survive the test of time?
That's the $60 million question, as they say. We had a really good presentation this week from a UN ambassador on the question of migration. And she told us We have to succeed. Failure is not an option, because we know from our history, when we allow nationalism to rise up in Europe, it leads to bloody war and disaster. So we have to succeed. And there isn't an option of failure on the table. And that's why these threats we face on the Brexit issue, the new American presidency in Mr. Trump and his new nationalism. Do we want a world and a Europe based on petty nationalism? We've been here before. We know where it leads. We know where it ends. It ends in destruction. So we have to succeed. And the question for politicians is to move out of this role of being just pragmatists, doing deals for our member states, looking after our own interest and not seeing the broader picture. And we need support from European citizens, especially young European citizens, who will stand with us as we make those hard decisions. So we have to succeed, because otherwise all of the ghosts of the past could come back very quickly.
Number 422, please.
Can you hear me? Yeah. Hello, everyone. My name is Savas. I'm from Cyprus as well. As we all know, there is youth unemployment in high numbers around the world. We teenagers are working hard for a future, but deep down, we are all concerned that despite our hard work, we will still have minor jobs and even no jobs as adults. What is the European Union doing to attack this problem, and what are its objectives? Thank you.
Well, I think this is absolutely crucial. Firstly, it's great to see so many questions from Cyprus. This is a fantastic example of the Cypriot people. Congratulations. I'm delighted to see that. Youth unemployment has to be addressed, and we've got to do it in a way which is genuine, in a way that actually delivers. And I see the malaise of youth unemployment as a crisis not just for young people, but a crisis for our entire economies. It's ruining lives, it's ruining families. I have 3 kids myself, 15 years of age, 12 and 10, and I often wonder what the future is going to hold for them. You know, in 5-6 years' time, hopefully they will go on and have a good education and be able to enjoy in Europe the advantages that I've enjoyed, that my generation has enjoyed. And we've got to get back to a competitive Europe. And the very strong view of my party, the European People's Party, will be to be outward looking in terms of growing Europe and making sure we reduce the barriers towards business in Europe to allow small businesses and micro businesses get the opportunity to get on. Governments do not create jobs. Jobs are created by business, and we've got to make sure that the business environment is right and competitive, and then Europe will come back. I'll give you one statistic. If you look at the last 16 years, the first 8 years rather, between 2000 and 2008, and then from 2008 to 2016 last year, the level of world trade in the last 8 years, i.e. since the crisis years, is only half the rate of growth as it was in the previous 8 years. 90% of the growth this year in the world is not coming from Europe. So we're not going to be able to fix our economies, get back to a better position, create the jobs for our young people especially, unless we have a more competitive economy. And that's why the youth guarantee that was put in place by the last Parliament, guaranteeing young people who can't get work for a period of time direct interventions for training, apprenticeship and the like, has to be enforced. And it's a large part of what we spend as a budget right now. That's really, really important. And I think member states need to be tested as to whether or not the youth guarantee is actually working within their member state. That's an intervention we have made that is making some progress in the area of youth unemployment. The good news, in the last year, 3 million jobs were created in the Eurozone economies because our economies are now stronger and we've come back from the worst of the crisis. We need to see that every year. and we need to see a focus on youth unemployment in member states which have very high rates of unemployment.
Number 149, please.
Thank you. I'm Wolf, and I'm not from Cyprus. I'm from Belgium. I have a question regarding fiscal laws. You said Europe needs to be competitive, yet many countries are not economically stable. Some come to mind here. Why has the Parliament not yet made use of a temporary solution or something so countries could adapt similar tax levels just to be economically stable?
Well, that's a really good question, Wolf, and I appreciate that. I think Parliament has done a lot, actually. It's not fair to say that Parliament has not been active in this area. All of the architecture of banking union, of economic surveillance, of the six-pack, the two-pack, the country surveillance, and the semester, all of that is monitored here in Parliament. This morning, in Parliament, I was able to question Daniel Noya, who is head of what's called the Single Supervisory Mechanism. It looks after banks to make sure that they have enough capital in them if they ever go bang, so that people aren't actually, the taxpayer isn't on the hook again as they were 10 years ago. And we play that role in supervising what is going on to make sure that the regulatory environment is right. But people have to live within their means. Our debt and deficit in Europe was too great. We were spending money that was not our money. I come from a country that went through an enormous financial shock, where in 1 year the tax base was reduced by over a third. And had we not got solidarity from our brothers and sisters in the European Union, we would have not been able to come through that. Portugal went through a very difficult phase. Spain went through a very difficult phase. Cyprus went through a difficult phase. Greece is going through a difficult phase, but I'm confident we can get Greece to a better place. So the role of the Parliament is to supervise all of that and to give some democratic accountability of the decisions that are taken by Eurogroup, by ECOFIN and by the IMF ultimately as part of a financial package. Is tax part of the solution? Yes. I personally believe that member states have the right to set tax rates. And this is a controversial issue. Not everyone in my own group would agree with me on that. There is a view towards harmonising corporate tax in Europe. But I think if we're going to remain competitive and strong on a European level, we need to be able to have the power at a member state level to set tax rates and determine taxation policy. It's not just good for those member states, it's good especially for Europe, because if we don't have that, we could lose out to other parts of the world. So I'm not in favour of tax harmonisation, but I'm aware that some colleagues are, and that debate is ongoing.
Mm-hmm. Number 284, please.
Hello, good afternoon. My name's Lydia Healy. I'm from Ireland, in Dublin. Or Dublin in Ireland. What would be your personal reaction and opinion on this questionable idea of a border, whether hard or soft, between the Republic and Northern Ireland?
Well, thank you very much, Lydia, and welcome to the European Parliament. You're a constituent of mine, so you're very, very important because you could vote for me one day. So I have to say that it's great to take all these questions. And by the way, if I say to our chairperson, if I'm talking too long, stop me. The good news is you only have 2 minutes to speak in the European Parliament, and sometimes they just switch the microphone off. You've asked a really good question about Ireland and the implications of Brexit, and I think I speak every single day to my colleagues here in the European Parliament. We're not going back to the past in Ireland, and the past, as you know, was this border between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland. We have now a peace process which has been fully supported by our friends in the European Union, financially, morally and politically. And Europe has invested so much in the Irish peace process. So we're going forward, and the way to go forward, even though Northern Ireland will not be in the European Union and the Republic of Ireland will be in the European Union. The way to go forward is through having no borders north-south, and we're working hard to make sure that happens. If we get Northern Ireland to a better place in terms of developing its economy, having a free-flowing public back and forth, we've got to do that by having open borders. And I hope we can find a solution to this. And the Irish government are working hard at this, as indeed my colleagues in the European Parliament are, to try to find a solution to this. One of the great privileges of being a member of the European Union, of being an EU citizen, is that you can travel freely. It is the fundamental right of every European citizen, no matter where they're from, Latvia, Estonia, Portugal, Italy, Greece, Ireland, wherever, France. You have a right to travel as European young citizens anywhere you like, and no one has a right to stop you doing that. And the day we give up that right is the day the European Union comes to an end, and we've got to defend it.
Number 18 is next, please.
Hi, my name is Zora, and I come from Croatia. I have a question. Facing the digital age, along with the fact that internet usage is widening and is used for almost everything, how are we going to protect classified data and prevent those from falling into wrong hands?
It's a huge issue. Data protection, data security, cyber security is a huge issue. We're looking right now even at ongoing elections in France. And the question is, are outside influences, Russia and the like, are they interfering in our democratic process as a consequence of cyber attacks? So if we're going to build a digital market economy, and let's not forget that 20 million small businesses in our union still do not operate a card facility when it comes to transacting business. And these are the people who will lose out because of the failure to take part in the digital market economy. So we have an absolute responsibility to get those people into technology and to make sure that they can transact their business, their goods and services, and take part in the single market. And we've got an absolute priority to preserve the information so that it does not get into the hands of those in crime or terrorists or other rogue states who will try to infect our financial system. I'm working on a report right now in financial services in fintech, and fintech is the big new development whereby payment and clearing services is the way of the future, how technology interfaces with the banks. And one of the biggest issues there is data protection and security. And we haven't found the solution to it yet, but it has to be found at a common EU level, at a supervisory level, to make sure that people have the confidence to use the digital age for the purposes of business transaction. Otherwise, the whole system will not stand up to a robust analysis, and it's a big issue across the work of Parliament in a number of areas.
Number 685, please. 685. 658, sorry.
Hi, I'm Sadie from the UK.
Yeah.
And like lots of people, I was absolutely devastated at the decision to leave the EU. And I was wondering, as a young person in the UK, what can we do to remain connected and in solidarity with the EU?
Well, Sadie, thank you very much for your remarks. And I think you have articulated what I hear from so many of my friends in the UK, a deep sense of frustration at what's happened, a deep sense of disconnection about what has happened. Can I tell you a story that left a big impression on me? A week after the decision on Brexit, about 50 pro-European MEPs met Wolfgang Schäuble, who is the finance minister in Germany. And he met us privately, but he left an indelible mark on the meeting. We were asking his his response to Brexit. And he said, when he was watching it on BBC that night at home, he said he cried because of what had happened, because of the importance of the UK as a European partner, and the importance of what Britain has done over the years in defending democracy, in standing up to tyranny and fascism in the 1930s and 40s, and giving so many of a fallen generation who had given their lives for freedom in Europe. And that historical connection between Europe and Britain, which is so real, all you have to do is to visit in Flanders some of the graveyards to see the ultimate sacrifice that the British Army and its allies made towards freedom and democracy in Europe. And Schäuble said that he was absolutely heartbroken at the decision, as we all are. And what can you do now? I mean, it is a matter entirely for the British people. Even whether you're in the European Union or not, and soon to leave, we have got to keep talking, and we've got to keep connections, and we've got to make sure, in my view, that Britain aren't punished for this. Because Britain may decide in the future, if things turn out badly, to look at this decision again, and the opportunity has to be there for Britain to do that, in my view. But that is a matter entirely for the British people. But Britain and the English people, the Scottish people, the Welsh people, the Irish people, whatever part of Ireland you're in, we're all Europeans. Nothing will stop English people from being, or British people from being Europeans. There's a common European identity. And our task is to make a strong European Union. A strong European Union that reaches out across boundaries and unites people. And we have to work hard at that day in, day out to make sure that argument is made. And hopefully at some time in the future, Britain might look again at the question of membership of the European Union. I very much hope it will.
Number 555, please. No. Next to 471, please.
Good afternoon, everybody, and my name is Ivan, and I come from Hungary, and my question is the following. What is the EU planning to do with countries who are doubtful about their membership? What decisions can be made to keep cooperating with countries who don't believe in the European Union, such as Hungary, whose government publicly advertises against Brussels' influence?
Well, if you're a member of the European Union, there are certain rights that you have, but equally there are obligations that you have as a member of the European Union. And you cannot play fast and loose with those obligations. You have a responsibility to deliver on the commitments you've made. We have an independent judicial system through the European Court of Justice to decide disputes between member states or decide disputes between, say, the Commission and member states. And there are fundamental rights that you have as a European citizen on top of your rights as a citizen of Hungary or a citizen of Ireland or a citizen of France or Germany. And those of us who work in the institutions must uphold those European rights. So I say to the government of Hungary, and I have seen various things said by the government of Hungary, that it must comply with the European Court of Justice and all of its obligations. And I'm very clear about all of those member states that remain in the European Union, that we have a common standard that we apply. And that's the same for Hungary as it is for any other member state. And the way to defeat governments who may choose to ignore parts of Europe and embrace other parts, or pick and choose the things they want to do, the way to defeat them is to use the institutions. Because the institutions must always stand up for the common interest. And sometimes the European Commission is kicked around the place and attacked in Dublin or in Budapest or in Paris or Frankfurt, wherever. But actually the Commission's task is always to see the wider issue for Europe and to defend Europe's interest. And we can't allow one or two member states to prevent us from doing what's in the common interest. And that's the same for Hungary as it is for elsewhere.
Next question is for number 179, please. Micro for 1 second.
Good morning. I come from Cyprus. As you may know, peace negotiations for the Cyprus problem have halted. Is the European Union willing and going to intervene in ensuring the continuation of peace talks and the results that benefits both the European Union and both communities, and make sure that occupying forces are removed?
Well, I have many good friends here in Parliament from Cyprus, and I know the history and the legacy and the bitterness of a divided country and a divided people, and how exactly that has worked its way out in terms of the modern Cyprus. And all I'll say is this. All over Europe, there are these problems. Cyprus is not unique. Ireland is an example, north and south, where the problems of green and orange, Catholic and Protestant are legacy problems. Problems in Belgium, between Wallonia and Flanders. Problems in Spain, between Catalonia and Spain. Regional issues in Italy, north-south. And the task of the European Union is to help overcome these regional issues, these regional nationalisms, if you like, by saying to all of those parts of Europe that, yes, people are different, we must respect that difference, but under the umbrella of the European Union, we can come together and we can create peace and stability. Look at what has happened in Northern Ireland. Over 40 years of bloodshed, lost lives, all of the misery that went with that has managed to come to an end, thanks to the European Union and our international support from the United States and elsewhere to bring this about. And I hope that the legacy of the peace process in Ireland may be of some use to the peace process in Cyprus. And I think Europe has a role to play in helping ultimately the resolution of those issues in Cyprus, as it has in other parts of the European Union. But we have a common EU citizenship, and we should never forget that. Our differences as English people, Irish people, Turks, I mean, we have a common heritage called Europe. And Europe allows us to resolve these differences under the umbrella of the European Union. So, to answer your question directly, yes, we have a role to play in Europe, within our borders, within the European Union, to help resolve the legacy issues in Cyprus, and I hope we can play that.
Number 158, please.
Hello, my name is Maya, and I'm from Croatia. So, how would the EU react if Turkey decides to let all immigrants in, and would there be some punishment for Turkey? Thank you.
Well, I don't think it's a question, Maya, of punishment for Turkey. We have an agreement with Turkey, and that agreement, whether it's, it's a controversial agreement, and it's trying to keep as many people who are fleeing from Syria and from the Middle East as close as they can be to those regions, so that when peace ultimately breaks out, they can go home to their home country. And I think the number one priority in the European Union in trying to resolve these issues, because it's a huge pressure for Greece especially, a country that's gone through a very difficult time, and Italy. It's a really big issue that landed on our doorstep, and we have not dealt with it well. And I think ultimately the deal with Turkey, despite the fact it was controversial, did allow us to create some support for Turkey as it was dealing with those issues. Take a country like Lebanon. It's a population of 4 million people. It has 1.5 million refugees in Lebanon. Extraordinary what they have done. Much of it through the support of the European Union. We must continue to support that. But the bigger issue, as far as I'm concerned, is this. 70% of all refugees have gone to 3 countries: Germany, Austria, and Sweden. That's not fair. It is not fair that such a large number have gone to such a small number of countries. And the question for my country and all of the other countries who have not taken their fair share is, what are we going to do to provide a safe haven for people who are fleeing from war and persecution? And Germany and Austria and Sweden should be congratulated. They have led the way in this area, and they are putting everyone else to shame. And until we get back to having a proper policy on migration, these issues will continually crop up, especially the issues of Turkey. But do we need a deal with Turkey? Yes, is my view.
Number 17 is next.
Hi, my name is Tomislav and I'm from Croatia. My question is regarding the voting age limit. What do you think is the appropriate age limit, and should it be lowered as it is in Slovenia and Croatia, where 16-year-olds and 17-year-olds can vote if they have a full-time job? Thank you.
I'm going to say something that I suspect is very unpopular to you and all of the delegates in Strasbourg right now. I'm in favour of voting at 18 and not before that. I think, you know, too often we say that, you know, we take for granted the right to vote. And I think you have to pick an age, but I actually believe that 18 is the right age to go. In terms of becoming an adult, having all of the responsibilities that go with that, going through the change that applies with that. I know there are countries, of course, you can work at 15 or 16 in some countries, but I'm not in favour personally of reducing the voting age to 16. I think it should remain at 18, but that's just my view. It's not probably a very popular view to the audience I'm speaking in Strasbourg, but that's my view.
Number 330, please.
Hello, my name's Amelia and I'm from the United Kingdom. You mentioned freedom of movement before. I was just wondering, do you think it's important to guarantee freedom of movement for the millions of citizens in the UK who wanted to remain in the European Union, including myself, but I'm 17 so I couldn't vote. And do you think it's important? And also, what do you think are the chances of this being guaranteed during and after Brexit negotiations?
Well, Amelia, the first thing we will do when we sit down to negotiate after the negotiating team is put in place is to deal with this issue. There are 3.5 million EU citizens living in the United Kingdom. Virtually all of them are working, helping to keep the UK economy going, doing jobs that a lot of English people won't do. And the same in my own country. There are jobs that Irish people won't do, that people from Czechoslovakia, Czech Republic, Poland, Baltic countries are very happy to do. So, that 3.5 million people, they're our people, they're EU citizens, and we've got to look after their rights in the UK, and they will be a central part of this negotiation. There are equally 1.5 million UK citizens living in the other 27 member states, and we've got to protect their rights too, to work and travel. I would hate to see any diminution of people's right to work, and I actually, in discussions with the British government right now, I was in London 2 weeks ago, I met Chancellor Philip Hammond and others. He was making the point very clear to me that the British government don't necessarily want to restrict the number of people coming to Britain because they need those people for their economy and for their growth and their opportunities. But they want the power to do it. And that's not the same thing. And I think we'll have to wait and see where that goes. But a crucial part of the negotiation, as Michel Barnier has said as our lead negotiator, is to make sure that our 3.5 million European citizens in Britain are looked after, protected and are given rights and no diminution of those rights, what they currently have. They remain welcome in the UK. We've got to make sure that happens for them. And equally, the British have to look after the 1.5 million UK citizens living in the 27. It will be a key part of the negotiation to obtain.
Number 314, please.
Hi, I'm Sarah from Belgium. And Belgium was attacked 1 year ago, and we stand up. Also because of the help from the European Union. This may be enough for now, but how can we as the European Union protect more countries from this terrorism?
Well, thank you very much for raising that question. And in Parliament today and yesterday, we reflected on this time last year on what happened in the bombings in the metro and the bombings in the airport in Zaventem. We all remember friends and colleagues and the destruction that caused. And we came out in solidarity yesterday in Parliament to remember all of those people. Because it wasn't just an attack on Belgium, it was an attack on the heart of the European Union, which is Brussels. And we were all affected by that. And I think we have got to help all member states in tackling terrorism. We don't have the luxury of sitting back and not working at a close level in terms of intelligence gathering, making sure that our police forces work with each other. We put through European Parliament, where you're sitting, over 7 months ago, a special regulation which allows us to follow those people who are coming from a war zone or could potentially go to a war zone without knowledge from one police agency to the next in terms of passenger name recognition on airplanes. That's a very simple thing we have done as a means of pushing through greater intelligence sharing across the 28 member states, and that's really important. It's equally important that we spend more in this area. We have a lot of threats from terrorists. We saw what happened in London yesterday. You can never provide a sure-proof way that that won't happen, because any lunatic can get into a car and mow down people. And some of the terrorist means of operating now are as basic as that. But we have got to work together, closely together, particularly on intelligence gathering and sharing across the European Union. And so much is dependent upon the sharing of information from one member state to the next. The exchange and extraditions, for instance, making sure that we track down illegal gains from criminality in terms of the banking system, that we shut down the opportunities for the criminal world to operate in one jurisdiction or in the next, or that criminal gangs cannot be operational. And that's why we need to work closely in intelligence. And I think the bombing in Brussels last year that you referred to, the bombing in Paris and what happened there, all of these actions in Madrid, London, highlight the need for more cooperation, not less.
Number 230, please.
Hello. Sir, my name is François, I'm from France. I wanted to ask you, now the terrorism is more inside the country, the terrorists are with the country's nationality where they are attacking. So I wanted to ask you how the EU can deal with the radicalization inside the country. Is the EU dealing with this, or it's the government dealing?
That's a really good question, because we have a responsibility to address issues that emerge in member states which could allow some people to take the route of terrorism. And as you rightly point out, many of the examples of people who have through criminality and terrorism have provoked these outrages are from within our own member states. Whether they feel disaffected or not is not the question. What we've got to do is address why these things are happening. And I do think the European Union has a role to play in addressing radicalisation in some of those communities, shining a light on good practice and bad practice, supporting financially the interventions that are necessary to help some of those communities themselves to confront those that are potential terrorists. And seeing the European Union as a kind of an umbrella of financial and moral support for the actions that need to be taken. So I think we can learn a lot from each other, good practice and bad practice, and support, as I said, through the EU budget, those initiatives that could help those communities themselves in confronting the people who can be a danger to themselves and to the rest of society. But the crucial thing is making sure we know who's coming into our countries, making sure that we can secure our borders, making sure that intelligence is passed from one police authority to the next, making sure that we have an interoperability when it comes to security policy. And I think that can only be done by securing borders, and we're very conscious of that. We don't want the European Union to become a place of fences and walls, but we do need to know who's coming into the European Union, where they are going, and whether or not they are a risk to people. That's the basic minimum criteria that our citizens expect.
Thank you. We're close to the end of this question and answer round. I can take one more question and then perhaps Mr. Hayes will say some closing words. The last question is for number 680.
Hello, my name is Anna and I'm from Sweden. And I have a question regarding communication between the EU and its citizens. A majority of us earlier today just answered a survey that said we weren't very well informed on business of the EU and, well, what it was about, especially in schools. And I was wondering maybe if you believe that perhaps we are not being as well informed as we should be and not enough effort is being put into sharing what is happening in our, to our countries and their populations.
Well, I think it is so important that people know what's going on. Information is power. Information is control. And too often we depend on journalists and the media to explain the work of the Parliament, to explain the work of the Commission, to explain the work of the Council. And not enough of that explaining is done in a way that informs citizens. Frequently it's a biased presentation of the facts. So in other words, if something good happens, it's all down to the member state government and the politicians in our member states. If something bad happens, it's all those faceless bureaucrats in Commission in Brussels. And we have allowed that debate to become this kind of us and them, the Brussels elite against everyone else. And it's a very dangerous debate, and I think it needs to be challenged. The only way it can be challenged is by information, as you rightly say. Now, we've a task to communicate what we do, the good bits and the bad bits. We've a challenge to go directly to our citizens and explain to them what's happening here in Brussels, because it affects their lives. I'll give you an example. Today at my Economic Affairs Committee of our Parliament, the Econ Committee, I made the point that 70% of all financial law in the European Union now is derived as a consequence of a co-decision making between the European Parliament and the European Council. So that's likely to increase, if anything, over the coming years if we're going to get a more integrated Europe. So we need to explain to citizens what's happening. But to do that, it's crucial that the media play its role too, rather than presenting it as a kind of an us and them. Because I've been a politician in my own country and here, and I have to say that the European Commission is very open in explaining things and being accessible and explaining rights, EU rights, to Irish citizens in a way that the Irish government can't explain them. So we have a huge job to communicate that, and I think for a younger generation, for you guys especially, to go back to your countries and explain to your member states your rights as EU citizens. I'm fundamentally committed to that idea, that I like the idea of having dual rights, of being Belgian or Irish and French or German, while also being European. I like that. I think that is the idea that I think European citizens do understand. It's something that the politicians are very bad at explaining, but it's something that I think people do understand and appreciate if we get the communication right.
Many thanks. Many thanks for participating in our question and answer round. Perhaps you will say 2 or 3 more words?
Well, just to say it's been a great privilege. There's some excellent questions, and to have everyone together like that from all of the member states contributing to our debate in the home of European democracy, the European Parliament of Strasbourg, has been an extraordinary privilege for me to take part in this questions and answer session. And if there's just one advice I might give you, it's this: to not take for granted the freedoms we have, to really recognise that a previous generation fought hard for the peace and the security and the freedoms we all have. Those freedoms are there between men and women, between people of different sexual orientation, between those who have much economically and those who have little. And the European Union is really around the fundamental belief in freedom. And if we can continue to focus on that, the imbalances, the inequity, the injustice of life where we live, because it's not a perfect world by any measure or means, we can continue to make progress for your children into the future. None of you think right now that you're going to become parents into the future, but you all will. And your task is to make sure that those kids, your kids in the future, have the same opportunities, the same rights that you'll have, I hope, in the course of your life. And I just want to wish you every success, every luck in your own member states, and thank you indeed for the opportunity today.
And with a big thank you to Brussels, we come to the end of this morning session.